Trenton 365 with Jacque Howard. Profiling the businesses, organizations, and people that make Trenton better.
Hello, friend, and welcome to the Trenton 365 Show. I'm your host, Jacque Howard. You can send me an email, trenton365show@gmail.com. You can find me on Facebook and Twitter at Trenton365. You can also post your events to the Trenton 365 community calendar page on Facebook as well. We've been trying something new here, doing a bit of a monologue, just providing a little bit more information about some of the things that I'm doing. And tonight I'm going to talk to you about civic engagement and the importance of that. We live in a community and in a country that's founded upon democracy, and I'm using air quotes for those of you who are just listening over the radio. And that means that the only way that democracy is going to work is when we have more people who are actually involved in the process. And when I say more people, I'm talking about not only you and your household, but also your neighbors and your residents in the community where you live. When we do that, when we hold our elected officials accountable, when we hold our school teachers and other public servants accountable, there's more of a likelihood that everyone's going to fall in line and fall in place. I know we've all been to those communities when we're traveling and we say, wow, isn't this beautiful? It's nice, it's neat, it's clean, it's safe, all those things. Generally, I would say that that is because most of the residents there are actively involved in building the community that they want. So it behooves us to consider that as well as we go forward, to be civically engaged. And that's one of the reasons why with Trenton 365, I used the hashtag Civic Engagement Radio. Stay tuned as I welcome Dr. Tanya Hernandez to the program. This educator professor is going to talk about her latest book. You'll be listening and watching the Trenton 365 show. We'll be right back after a short break.
One in three adults has prediabetes. 1 in 3. That means it could be you, your football buddy, your football buddy, or you, your best man, your worst man, you, your dog walker, your cat jogger. While 1 in 3 adults has prediabetes, with early diagnosis, prediabetes can be reversed. Take the risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and its prediabetes awareness partners.
Are you a dog lover? Then don't miss any of your 3 chances to bring your well-behaved, 4-legged best friends to Arm & Hammer Park with the Bat Dog Bundle, a special 3-game ticket plan where you can bring your dog to the game free of charge. This season at the Trenton Thunder, 3rd-generation Bat Dog Rookie will be honored with a pair of giveaways, and you can get your hands on both of them and enjoy a night out at the dog-friendliest ballpark in all of baseball. Get to TrentonThunder.com to order your Bat Dog Bundle today.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Trenton 365 Show. You can always send an email, Trenton365show@gmail.com. And at this time, it is my pleasure to welcome to the airwaves and the television screen, Dr. Tanya Hernandez. Now, I've known Dr. Hernandez for many years through our faith community at Westminster Presbyterian Church, but it wasn't until recently that I actually had a conversation or two about what she does. And I was blown away when I started looking at her CV and following up about her background. And she said, you know, I've got this book that's coming out, Multiracials and Civil Rights, Mixed Race Stories of Discrimination. And you can see the postcard. I'm holding it up right here. But all this information will be up on the social media sites for Trenton 365. So, Tanya, it is great to actually have you in this setting where we're talking about your professional status. So thank you for your time.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here.
Oh, awesome. So let's start first. I'm talking about you as an educator, as a professor, and law. And then let's roll right into your book.
Okay. Well, I grew up in New York City. So I'm part of the tri-state area.
Amen.
And I was very fortunate to get a scholarship as a young person in high school, the A Better Chance Program Scholarship. Literally, that's what it was called, A Better Chance, ABC.
Nice.
And it did give me one. So I went off to a fancy little prep school on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. Then that gave me the opportunity to go away to college, and I went to Brown University. They gave me a full scholarship. God bless Brown University. And from there, I worked a little bit, and then I went to law school. I was fortunate to also get more scholarship money to go to the Yale Law School. And after being in practice for a number of years, I realized that what I wanted to do, in addition to helping people with direct client services, was to sort of help people better understand issues of race discrimination and sort of try in that way to contribute to the world. And so that's what I've been doing as a law professor, sort of trying to distill these insights within the classroom, but also to the broader public in what I write and what I share, social media, etc.
Now, when you talk about how fortunate you are with the scholarships, not only for high school, but also college as well, I think that gives you a totally different perspective, because I've got a daughter who is fortunate enough to get scholarship monies to go to high school at a private school, prestigious private school. Shout out to Stewart Country Day School. So she also sees that as well. And I want you to talk a bit more about when you realized early that there was this divide between the different cultures and communities, not only based upon finances, but just based upon ethnicity.
Well, growing up in New York City in the 1960s and 70s, I was born and raised in a time where sort of diversity was being celebrated. Right? We didn't use that word, that language of diversity, but certainly in urban spaces like New York City, that certainly was sort of part of the ethos and the culture. But this is the thing. I grew up in a Puerto Rican family. And within this Puerto Rican family, I would hear a lot of negative remarks, both in English and in Spanish, about anybody of African ancestry, right? So if you were a black Puerto Rican, that was a problem. If you were African American, that was a problem. Right? And a lot of racial stereotyping and derogatory comments being made. And I understood this and identified it sort of very readily as an issue of bias and discrimination, because my mother raised me to see it. She identifies as a black Puerto Rican woman. And part of her upbringing that she shared with me was that she was almost given away by her family when she was born, because everyone in the family thought she was too dark.
Now, I'm gonna, because folks, this is going to be much more of a conversation that Tanya and I are having, a little bit different than my normal interviews. And I want to say, Tanya, that when I talk to my friends of Latino background, especially the ones who are Puerto Rican, who clearly say that there's a divide between black Puerto Ricans and they say white Puerto Ricans, and they talk about how the discrimination sometimes within families is so tough. I mean, one of my coworkers, she was called Moya all the time. And I was like, well, Moya, but she was like, it means dark. And I think about growing up, could you imagine if you had two siblings and one was called, the nickname was Moya, what that would do to them?
Well, and my mother was the unwanted dark-skinned baby, and her sister, who was older than her by 2 years, was sort of the light-skinned with the good hair, favored child. And that racialized treatment of the two sisters and compare and contrast happened their entire lives. So she carried some significant scars from that, but she also, as so many of us, when we have these experiences, right, it either destroys us or it makes us even that much more resilient. And that was certainly the case. So, she is my superhero, my mom. And she raised me knowing this backdrop, and also to sort of be able to identify and to call out these issues of discrimination that exist at the very same time that in Latino cultures, and Puerto Ricans in particular, are busy celebrating our racial mixture. Like, we're busy saying, oh, how much more evolved we are than sort of North Americans, than U.S. people, because we come from a racially mixed culture and a racially mixed background. So this idea of like, oh, I can't be racist because, I have all of these mixtures in my background. Yet, this celebration of racial mixture, or I call it sort of a rhetorical celebration of racial mixture because it's like a name only, happens at the same time that we're busy denigrating one particular part of that mixture, meaning blackness need not apply.
Wow. So at a young age, being taught by your mother and recognizing it, and I'm sure growing up in a very culturally diverse community like New York, and then going to high school and then being put in this I would assume, a prestigious school. What was that experience like?
Well, what's interesting is that when I was in preschool, I was in a Head Start program, and it was very diverse, and, it was a joy to attend. I'm still in public school when I go off to first grade, but I'm separated from everybody I've known in preschool. And I'm in a classroom where it is only dark-skinned Puerto Ricans and African Americans, and it's like really chaotic. Like we're left alone, no teaching's going on, we're kind of running around. And I, share this with my mother. So when she comes into the school to sort of like, what's going on? Why is my daughter sort of like in this wild west of a situation? They tell her that I was placed in special education because of my Spanish language learning needs, which is kind of weird because she taught me to speak in English first because she didn't want for me to be left back in public school because that had been her experience being a predominantly Spanish speaker. And it was also pretty weird because in this classroom, there were lots of African Americans who didn't speak any Spanish. And there was no bilingual education happening. So, it's like, so I sort of bring that up because that was a real early experience about the ways in which racial difference was already being relied upon to try to sort us in public school. So, when she helicoptered in, to use a 2000 word for something that happened in the 1960s, she helicoptered in and said, no, this is not right. They put me in a mainstream classroom, and so I was able to get some actual education. But that wasn't the first time or the last time that I continued to see the ways in which, the last name may be Hernandez, and we're supposed to be all favorably treated because of our racial mixture, at least within our ethnic groups. But the outside world, and even within the ethnic group, there are these constant ways of sorting people based on how dark they are, their hair texture, their phenotype, how black are your features. And this is sort of the irony of this idea about celebrating racial mixture in Latino communities, is that we are super, super aware and zero in on all aspects of racial appearance. So meaning, some people think, it's about a light-skinned, dark-skinned thing. We go beyond that. We have words not only for a light-skinned, dark-skinned person. We have words for you're light-skinned but with African features. You're light-skinned with Euro features, but you got bad hair. We have a whole array of words for all of this, right? So it's a very sophisticated grammar, if you might put it that way, of racializing people.
Here in Trenton, we've got a very, very diverse population as well, and a lot of Latino, Hispanic cultures and subcultures are represented here. And recently, I was out to dinner at one of the local spots, and started asking some questions, because most of the people who were working there were of Spanish descent, and they broke it down. No, I'm Dominican, they're Guatemalan, he's Puerto Rican, on and on and on, And I'm thinking, because we've had conversations when we're doing outreach through nonprofits and through church and even in the city itself, like how do you reach all these different groups and subgroups? Because sometimes different cultures don't communicate so well with other cultures. Like I've heard our Ecuadorians and Costa Ricans and Guatemalans and Mexicans and Puerto Ricans and Dominicans, you get them all together, they kind of all don't communicate so well together.
There are cultural differences within all these groups, but the other thing that you're sort of hitting on are the ways in which within this whole array of different kinds of cultures, in Guatemala, Spanish is not even the first language, right? The whole array of Mayan languages, right? So Spanish is like, what are you speaking? But even within that kind of diversity, what you are seeing often in the United States are how people bring with them a very particular understanding of the racial identities of the countries themselves. Meaning we have a pecking order that sort of puts Argentina and Chile and Uruguay sort of at this top of a hierarchy because of the notion that they're sort of more European. And at the very bottom, you have places like Brazil, Colombia, Dominican Republic, because of their perception of being much more African dominant. And then in the middle, you have like these mestizo countries, depending on what area you're in. Like, Mexico might be in the middle range, or maybe not. But I say all that to say this, that when differences are being made across different Latino ethnic categories, what you're hearing is not just, because, their culture's different. We don't eat arepas. We eat pernil. So it's not just about that. Often right below the surface, it's also a racialized hierarchy.
I'm speaking with author and professor Tanya Hernandez. Her book came out in August of 2018, and I've just been able to get in touch with her. That's how busy she is. And the name of her book is Multiracials and Civil Rights, Mixed Race Stories of Discrimination. And Tanya, the best way for people to get your information, it's available at nyupress.org, and they can also call. Is that
they are welcome to go on to Amazon or Barnes. Every local online bookstore. Go buy the book.
All right. And so, because I want to make sure that we get a bunch of this through, and we may end up going a little bit longer than 30 minutes, just because my head is filling up with all these different thoughts. So you transition, you're taught at home about racial identity, your blackness, so to speak. Mm-hmm. You go to school, you have some experience in public school, you then go to an affluent grammar school. You then go to college, and you don't just go to college, you go to Brown University, you go to Ivy League, and you're on a ride. Talk about that culture shock and when you realize, I want to practice law.
Well, that was a very interesting voyage. And so I get to Brown, and initially I envision myself as being there because I want to pursue, questions about how people are treated, sort of histories. I want to get better immersed in Black history because there was a deficit of that being taught to me in high school and elsewhere. But I'm thinking at the end of this road, what I want to do is bring Black culture to be important in public spaces. So I'm thinking that I will one day be a museum curator. Right? That is sort of like this fantasy that I have for myself, because I love art, but I want to be sort of part of the business of art. And after being on campus for just about a month or so, I sort of move away from that path very quickly because of all the activism that's happening on campus. It's a time, this is the early 80s, in which there were a number of racial bias incidents on campus, fraternities, white fraternities, throwing bottles at Black women as they walked by, articulating racial slurs. And so in response to those kind of racial acts of violence and hostility, I get that much more animated about being sort of part of a political engagement on issues of race and equality. And so, goodbye, being a museum curator. But I resist the idea of being a lawyer because I don't know any lawyers. I'm in college, and I am, as they call it now, first generation. Right? No one else in the family has gone off to college, let alone law school. And so I don't think of myself as being, a lawyer, because I've never seen anything other than Perry Mason or what have you on television.
So wait, I want to stop you right there, because that's also something that I think a lot of people, especially people who are Caucasian or white, they don't understand why it's important for people of color to see people like them in lots of different settings, which is why it's so important for us to have a President Obama, a Michelle Obama, other national and international figures who look like people of color.
Exactly. And it was interesting because I had been advised by professors in college, even in high school as well, to sort of identified, I suppose, my argumentative nature and analytical mind, and it suggested, you should think about law school. And the only people that I saw who were interested in law school were either white people who had been sort of grooming themselves from early on because their parents had been lawyers. So I didn't identify with that. And then a few people who were African American, but who were sort of deeply already enmeshed in issues of law. Somehow they had been touched early on with this. And I thought, this is not something that, I have a role to play, that I'm not part of this. And so it's almost against my own best interests that I finally end up in law school. I leave college. I think to myself, I need a job. And I need a job that pays because I still have some loans I need to pay off. And I want to have a job that is a sign of professionalism because this is something I understand. So I wanted to be a manager.
Gotcha.
So I get this job working at Bloomingdale's in New York City in their management trainee program. And I think, I've arrived. I'm going to be a manager. And I don't like it at all. It's a cultural misfit, And so I hurry up, like within a month, run back to the college career placement office. Like, please, I need a new job. I hate this old job. And all they have for me at this point that was leftovers was to be a paralegal in a law firm. And it was a paralegal in a patent law firm. And so meaning dealing with patents and trademarks and all the lawyers there are sort of people who had been chemistry or biology people in undergraduate college. And so, again, not the best cultural match for me, but this is what I discovered. I loved the problem solving. I loved thinking about how can law sort of have a relevance to people in the problems that, are raised for them. And this happens even in a corporate environment. I thought, if I like it here, how much more am I going to like it when it's applied to issues of people of color? So after working for a paralegal, I applied to law school, and I am so fortunate to be able to be accepted to the Yale Law School.
Tanya, share your contact information, such as how people can reach out to you.
I would love if people would follow me on Twitter. I only have 2 Twitter followers right now.
We'll get that out.
So it's at Professor TKH. And I can also be reached on the Fordham University School of Law website. Just Google Professor Tanya Hernandez at Fordham, and you will find me right away.
All right, so I'll make sure that we get those numbers up for you, and then when we talk later, you can tell me how many people have started following you and so forth. All right, so you go to law school, you finish up law school. What led you to teach? Because I think that's a whole nother transition.
Yes. I had been working in a couple of different ways in the legal profession. And I have to say was one of the most meaningful is that I was working in a legal services office, but it was a legal services office in the 80s that was dedicated to servicing people who had HIV or either full-blown AIDS. And at that time, that was a death sentence. Right? So it was work that I found sort of hugely important and was gratified to do. But that kind of stuff takes a toll on you when you have clients who are dying on you fast, right? And I found that there was this undercurrent within the way in which AIDS was not being fully acknowledged at this period in the 80s because of the racialized elements that were going on. Meaning when the population was seen as white, wealthy gay men, there was still a resistance to dealing with their issues, but they were able to harness their socioeconomic privilege and their white status to sort of make their demands known, right? And ACT UP makes sense in the world because it has behind it the power of people who are already sort of privileged in society. When the HIV and the AIDS epidemic then starts to be predominantly a problem about people of color and women of color, right, who are being, who the disease being transmitted to, there's less and less of a social concern with the people who are dying. And it seemed to me you couldn't just talk about this as a problem of, people are biased because they're afraid of the disease, or people are biased because they have an inherent bias against people who are LGBTQ identified. This was bigger than that, right? And you couldn't quite sort of address everything if you wanted to talk about it in a colorblind way. And this wasn't something I had a space to do as a legal professional, right? Because this is something that takes a while to kind of roll out and analyze and to explain to people. This is something that I had to do in an academic setting, ironically enough, like to really have the space to say everything I needed to say. I needed to be able to do it in a context in which I could speak to law students, to show them how this stuff was important in their lives as professionals, and also be able to write about it in a space that's bigger than a couple of pages of what you write for a judge on a legal motion.
And that's so spot on as to why our educators are so important, and why we need to have educators who are completely committed to growing that next generation. Because if you're just taking that information and knowledge and regurgitating it for a test, so to speak, and not actually grooming people and expanding the minds of the people you're educating, you're kind of almost wasting time. So being in a college setting, all the students that you have, at least now it's on their mind, the social economics that are involved with this, not only the disease, but also all the other things that go along with that. And you know as well as I do, if you're an intellectual and you're someone who starts reading, you never just skim the surface. You're always going a little bit deeper, and then that's when that whole spirit takes over, and you start finding all these little bits and nuggets, and they start formulating it all together for yourself. Start saying, wow, I think I know what I want to do with the rest of my life. So, folks, I've got author and professor Tanya Hernandez in, and the name of her book is Multiracials and Civil Rights, Mixed Race Stories of Discrimination. It's available on all the traditional sites, Amazon. You can also go to the NYU Press Store. She's part of the staff. She's a professor at Fordham, so you can go to Fordham University and go on their site, and you can look her up there. I'll also have all her contact information and the book link as well on the social media sites. Steve, we go for a break? Yes, you've been listening and watching the Trenton 365 show, and we'll be back after a short break.
Truck to move? Let Justin's Rental of Selman's BP save the day. Justin's has the right trucks for all commercial and residential moves. Justin's has the moving supplies and boxes available. Justin's Rental at Selman's BP has everything you need for your move at affordable prices, featuring the best in pickup trucks, 10 and 15-foot box trucks and vans. Justin's Rental at Selman's BP is located at 2596 South Broad Street, across from the McDonald's in Hamilton. For your rental truck needs, call 609-888-3327. That's 609-888-3327. Justin's Rental at Selman's BP. If you are moving, we have the trucks to meet your moving needs.
And welcome back to the Trenton 365 show. In the studio with me is author and professor Tanya Hernandez. Her book is Multiracials and Civil Rights, Mixed Race Stories of Discrimination. You can find this on all the traditional sites, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. She's a professor at Fordham University. You can go on their site and link up with her there as well. And again, this information will be up on the Trenton 365 show Facebook page. We're going to talk now about the book. This is also one of those conversations that we can easily go on for several hours, and there'd only be a handful of people who'd be staying for the whole time. But we're going to start talking about the book a little bit. I know earlier I was sharing that I wanted to have you talk about the process of writing the book, because I think that there's a lot of people who think this, oh, you get a book deal and you're jet setting all over the country doing these book events. And you and I both know that's not what the reality is, at least not for most people who are authors. But we're going to talk about that at a later time, because you're going to come back onto the show. But I do want you to talk about your book, Multiracials and Civil Rights, Mixed Race Stories of Discrimination, the impetus behind writing the book, and how you evolved in this process of writing.
Okay. Well, I first got interested in the topic. So this idea of people who identify as mixed race, biracial, multiracial, etc. How those individuals who identify in that sort of fluid way with multiple categories, how when they file claims of discrimination, do judges understand what's going on? Right? Do judges think, oh, yeah, I get it. You can be discriminated even if you're mixed race based on race, or do they not get it? Mm-hmm. And the reason why I got curious about this is because I started to read the accounts of people in various periodicals that were claiming, oh, this is a brand new development. People who identify as racially mixed, and judges don't understand it. And so we need a whole new civil rights law specifically for mixed race people. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was a little curious because it didn't quite mesh with my own experience of what it means to be mixed race and not have society really treat you racially different when they want to discriminate. Meaning, it may be culturally different depending on sort of where you live and who you're with, etc. But as far as the crude dynamic of being discriminated against, meaning you can't enter because I don't think you belong in this space, sort of a shorthand way of describing discrimination, that I've never seen happen in ways that's different for people who are mixed race. It's always about being viewed as an other and other as unwanted. But I thought, let me read these cases for myself because maybe there's something here I'm missing that I never noticed before. And what I see is that I look at cases in workplace context, in housing context when people apply for apartments or when they're being evicted. I look at it even in the criminal justice system, or some might say injustice system. But in any case, right? I look at it in the criminal context. And what I see in all these different contexts in which people can say, I've experienced discrimination, judge, please resolve my claim, is that while, yes, it's different to have this growing population of people in courts saying that they're racially mixed as a personal form of identifying, what they then describe as what happened to them, it's unfortunately nothing new. What they claim is, I was viewed as racially non-white, and when I was viewed as racially non-white by some person with a bias, that was when I was denied the promotion. I was denied the job opportunity. I was told I can't live here anymore, that my lease won't be renewed. Right? All these ways in which we understand the processes of discrimination. And so then I thought, well, wait a minute. These folks look like they have sort of a regular claim of discrimination. It's not different because they identify as racially mixed.
Now, and I want to back it up and have you give some examples of multiracials or racially mixed, just so that the audience can kind of sort of put it together. And I'll say this, I personally am not, that I know of, racially mixed. My mom was light-skinned black, my dad was dark-skinned black. But I know that I'm considered a light-skinned black. And I'm sure that in some period of time in my life, some people probably said, oh, his mother or his father, maybe, or something along those lines. So if you could give some examples.
Right. Well, I guess I want to back up for a second because I purposely use this language of multiracial identified, right, to be able to describe very specifically, not the idea that there's this growing population of people who are actually racially mixed, even if they have parentage across multiple racial groups, one person's white, one person's black, etc., one person's Asian, one person's black, but instead to say there's a growing group of people who identify themselves now, meaning when they say, what are you? Their answer is a multiplicity of categories. That's a new development. Okay. The actual existence of racial mixture, that's an old story, right? Meaning there's never been purity. And if you look at people who are in the group known as African Americans, right? How do we get all different shades? It's because there's been some racial mixture, right? Not necessarily a love story, unlike what you see in an Ancestry.com commercial, right? That has since been taken off the air, thank goodness. Right? But because of the horrific experience of slavery and rape, right? To be perfectly precise. But in any case. So that's one thing, right? It's not racial mixture is not new, but people identifying now with their racial mixture as their own sense of personal identity, that's kind of new. right? Within since the 90s, or really, after Loving v. Virginia in the 1970s said, okay, we're not going to allow you to forbid people from marrying across racial lines. We have more people now identifying because they're born into families in which there are these different racial categories, right?
And for those of you, the Loving story, 1990. Do some research on that family and what they went through and what's transpired since. But that's another topic, another time.
So when I look at these cases and I see, well, the dynamic they're describing that happened to them, that part's not new, right? That part, put in black identity, put in Asian identity. And what gets described is the same thing as far as discrimination is concerned. I was compared disfavorably with some white person in the workplace, disfavorably with a white applicant for the apartment in the building. Right? I was told, oh, there's no apartment. When I showed up, they saw my brown face. Right? Meaning the discrimination itself is sort of part of a historic legacy of bias against non-whiteness. So then I started to look, well, then why is it that there are people who think that this is something new and warrants a whole rethinking of civil rights law? And what I saw was that there were commentators who want to do two things. They want to say that people who identify are mixed race are different, one, because they themselves are the symbol that racism is going away. Okay, meaning just the existence of people who are now identifying across mixed race lines means that we have evolved. Right? So they're equating sort of as a shorthand, racial mixture equals racial utopia. Racial mixture equals racial progress.
My so-and-so my grandchild is so-and-so. Right. Those types of things. Right. Like it's almost similar to, I've got a friend of that ethnicity. Right.
And here's the thing. I got nothing against multiraciality, mixed race families, etc. But I do have a problem with a presumption that means we as a society don't have to do the hard work of actually inculcating racial equality. Meaning you don't get racial equality simply because there's a couple of mixed race families in the world. Right? The experience in Latin America has shown quite the contrary, right? That we can have all kinds of sort of verbal celebrations about racial mixture, and then who do we see at the socioeconomic bottom of society? Dark-skinned people. Right? And that doesn't happen by accident. That happens because social systems are creating barriers to opportunity that maintain people in a segmented part of the socioeconomic order.
And that needs to be one of the conversations that we have later. As when I say later, I mean not right this second, but I mean later. We need to do that. I do want you to touch a little bit on the significance of your book, your studies, and where we are culturally. And I would say just in America and in some European countries, but what we're starting to see is that there's more, I guess, alt-right. There's an alt-right international movement. I mean, Brazil and some of these other countries that are countries of people of color who are even specifically saying we want to start separating more.
Well, it's what's so fascinating is you have this whole sort of global phenomena now, right, of sort of more overt expressions of wanting to sort people in the world based on their physical appearance, right? And also a growth of us versus them mentality. That's not new, but this openness with sort of advocating it, I think something really tremendously horrible has been unleashed in the world, right? So that we see it in Bolsonaro's Brazil and we see it in Agent Orange's America, right? And so, yeah, I won't call him by the title of president. I use the Spike Lee preference of calling him Agent Orange. But in any case, what we're seeing this sort of like very troubling dynamics, but we're also seeing at the same time these very same mouthpieces for reactionary politics claiming that, mixed race people mean we don't have to have civil rights laws anymore. Mixed race people mean we don't really need affirmative action, and affirmative action or policies of social inclusion are really can't even be enforced properly because what do we do with people who are mixed race? So it's sort of a very strategic way of positioning mixed race people as both undermining the justification for policies of social inclusion and also attacking policies of social inclusion. Right? And we even see it with the Supreme Court justices. So I track this in the book as well, in a chapter where I sort of like look at the idea of like, that rhetoric has consequences, like meaning constantly talking about mixed race people as being racially exceptional can be picked up by others who do not share your politics, right? And they're being picked up by very reactionary Supreme Court justices who want to say, we can't continue validating the policies of affirmative action because, as the world becomes more multiracial, we have less and less need for this, and mixed race people make it confusing to try to figure out who should be included and not included.
It goes back to my monologue about the importance of people being actively involved in this democracy that we call our government, whether it's on the local level, the statewide, or nationally. We need to be involved in the game. We need to know what these laws are being written, the local ordinances, et cetera, because there's a very particular system that's designed, and you so eloquently nailed it, that the darker you are, generally, you're going to be placed at the lower spectrum of the totem pole. And I probably shouldn't be using the totem pole analogy, but anyway. All right, so as we move forward, right, I haven't finished your book, so I don't know how it ends, and I don't want you to give it away, of course. But where do we as a society go? I know that we're educating, we have advocates, and I know that because of the concentration of where we are on the East Coast. I mean, there's a lot of people doing a lot of amazing things. I don't know what it's like in the Midwest. I don't know what it's like in the Deep South or in the Midwest. Where do we go from here as a culture if we're going to progress and start removing some of these blinders on our eyes, one, and these walls that are separating us?
Well, the main thing that the book seeks to do, and the book looks at cases across the United States, and so it looks at cases in the Midwest, it looks at them in the South, the East, and the West Coast, etc. Right? And what it sort of ends up trying to sort of express is that, yes, people may be evolving in interesting ways with regards to how they personally identify, but we shouldn't confuse the ways in which personal identity informs what happens with regards to tiers of inequality. Right? What I mean to say is this, right? That when discrimination happens, it happens based on group affiliation, whether you feel you're part of the group or not. That racism, discrimination is a very crude an unfavorable kind of experience, and it's one that's informed by material inequality, meaning it's not about how you personally identify, it's all about how a social system from the outside sorts you and then creates barriers to your access to various things, right, to social goods. And that there's been, I think, too much focus for many of our young people in wanting to promote free expression of who they are. And don't get me wrong, I think that's a beautiful thing, but from a political engagement perspective, it leaves unattended, in very problematic ways, a focus on group-based inequality. I mean, some people say, discrimination when people won't sort of like call you by the group that you want to be called by. So meaning, let's say that Tiger Woods, right, was sort of famous for saying, I'm not black, I'm Cabalasian, I believe was his term. And if you didn't call him Cabalasian, he would feel that you were personally insulting him, and that for him, that's discrimination. Well, here's the thing. It's true. That may not feel good to him. But you know what also doesn't feel good? Not being promoted on your job because people think you are non-white. Not being able to live in an apartment that you can afford, and your credit shows that you can afford to live there, simply because you are viewed as non-white. That also doesn't feel good. Mm-hmm. Once we have laws that are properly enforced that deal with the group-based structural inequalities, we can then deal with the more nuanced aspects of your personal identity not being recognized and insulted. But you know what I predict? If we deal with the group-based inequality, that personal stuff will take care of itself.
I think that's a great way to end up. So I've had author, Professor Tanya Hernandez, and her book is Multiracials and Civil Rights, Mixed Race Stories of Discrimination. It's available on all the sites where you can get a book, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and you can also go to NYU Press, and you can reach out to her directly by going to Fordham University and just doing a search. It's Tanya with an A, Hernandez. Thank you very much, and look forward to having you come back soon.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure. And I would simply say to the audience that if they want to get a 20% discount on the book, they can do it at the NYU Press site and use the code indicated there before you on that postcard.
Yep, it's P as in Paul, C as in Charlie, 20. Papa Charlie 20 is the code, save 20%. And again, this postcard will be up on the social media sites as well. So can't wait to have you back, Tanya.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You've been listening and watching the Trenton 365 show. Stay tuned. We'll be back after a short break.
Trenton 365. I am your host. I took over from Jacque. I didn't even take over nicely. I was like, get out that seat and
just
get on
rush
the
the
other
show.
side. That's how you got to do, Jacque. You're listening on 1300 WIMG, the 4-time Stellar Award winning station. Yeah, y'all should see him. Oh my goodness, those that are listening on the radio. Hello, see, everybody think it be me. No, it's Jacque for real, because I'm the calm one. And then you'll watch it on WPHY. Hi, Jacque.
Hey, we got to go quick, man, because, that earlier interview with Dr. Tanya Hernandez was banging. Her book, Multiracials and Civil Rights. I'm actually super intrigued, and I encourage folks to check this out.
You got to look at me when you want to.
I am. Come on, why you always got to do this to me? We need to do a show. I'm tired of saying that. We need to just do it. But anyway, I do want to get to a few things. And
Can I ask the question first?
But I want to tell you that I appreciate you, and I thank you for everything that you do.
Oh, you're so nice. That wasn't what you was going to say, though.
No, it is, really.
Okay. Oh, you're so sweet in this 1 second in America. I appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, can I ask the question before
you
tell us what you're doing? Hi, Jacque. What are you up to?
Oh, man. I am up to so much. And you know what? I am, again, I always like to give credit where credit's due. And again, you were the one who got me into this crazy business. And thank you very much for that. But I've got so much going on. Some of the things that, on the forefront are things that I've been doing for a while, like the skate park, like having an outdoor skate park built.
Can we put a pinpoint in that real quick?
Sure.
I enjoy going on, especially Instagram, because I will Instagram before Facebook because people don't know you're on until you like something. Mm-hmm. So, but I enjoy going on and looking at the smiles that's on the children's faces right there. And that park, that used to be the parking lot I played in as a child. I used to live on Perrine, right across the street from Taylor Pork Road.
Yeah.
Yeah, so 28 Perrine. That used to be our family house. I'm going to leave it at there. But we used to play everything in that parking lot. Oh. And so for me to now see it being utilized correctly is a beautiful thing, but to see the smiles that's on the children's faces are amazing.
Yeah, I always tell folks that, I was not a skateboarder, I was a BMXer, but Mark Lexington, who's a childhood friend, was really into skateboarding, and he used to work for the city of Trenton. And many years ago, I said, hey, man, how come we don't have a skate park here in Trenton? And he's like, I don't know. So we started organizing, and we've partnered with Freedom Indoor Skate Park, which is a nonprofit entity operating in partnership with the Trenton Circus Squad. Out of the Roebling Wireworks building. And then there's Board for Bros, which is a national nonprofit. They have a New Jersey chapter that's been distributing boards through our programs. In addition to that, we've got Gray Colt skateboards and Old School skateboards, which are two local skateboard companies who are also part of this movement, plus the bike polo scene and the bike modification scene. We just got some really awesome stuff happening with skateboarding, and I'm super stoked about it. And you can follow us on Facebook, Friends of Amtico Square. And starting May 11th, every Saturday from 9 to 12, we'll be over at Sunny Vereen Park in East Trenton, and we'll be skateboarding over there. Folks can make donations of water and food so the kids and the people who come out and skateboard and BMX can hang out, for a little while and just have a good time. And we get to educate more people and get more people experience with skateboarding.
Especially in the African-American community / Black, whichever one they want to identify with. I believe in exposing our children to not what's normal. Mm-hmm. So my boys, one of them swam, the other one wrestled, and then the third one helped bring back chess and start a chess club at Junior 3 and then Trenton High. So I just believe in not doing what's quote unquote typical normal for African American / Black children.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's important as well, because we've got to get beyond this whole ideology of like how we were taught.
Right.
There are no more boundaries. I mean, we are a global society. We're global citizens. If something's hot and you're interested in it, wherever it's taking place, run with it.
Run with it. All right, so keep going because you are a part of other things.
I got that. And then Library Boxes of Trenton, WIMG has adopted one of those boxes.
Thank to anybody, I don't know who that is that's being an angel and putting stuff inside our box because I forget. But when I check, I'm like, yes, the book angel has come again. Okay, go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
I forget, Jacque. I check it like once every 2 weeks.
Whatever. Anyway, so Library Boxes of Trenton, we have a podcast that I've been doing the third Saturday of each month from 1 to 3 p.m. at Classics Books and Gifts. any children who are from Trenton, New Jersey, who live in Trenton, can come to Classics Books and Gifts and get free books. Free books. Because we're trying to make sure that we get every student in Trenton to have their own library, because the success rates, not only reading by the 3rd grade, but also children who grow up in homes where they have a library, no matter how big that library is, that it totally exemplifies how much money they're going to make and to further their education. So Library Box is a Trenton podcast. And I've got a new podcast that's starting, and it's going to be about sports, and I'll be doing that with my friend, the comedian Dan Regan. Shout out to Dan Regan. Folks, he is what we call a clean comic. He's been on here several times. So we're going to be giving our personal spin on what's happening in the world of sports with his comedic style, because if anybody asks, you would say I have nothing funny in besides the way I look.
Well, see, like, there you have it. I don't even have to say it now. I'm glad we're on the same page.
You are so sweet. I also want folks to know that Mercer Street Friends, I've partnered with them. Also the 3rd Saturday of each month, beginning at 9 a.m. and in Franklin Park, we're giving away free food. We've been giving away emergency food bags for the last couple of months, and we give about 50 to 100 bags away to families. They include dry goods, pastas, canned fruits, vegetables, etc. And a lot of the stuff is donated from Wegmans, Whole Foods, so it's not government stuff. It's good quality stuff.
If someone wanted to donate, how could they do that?
Well, as far as the donations go for the Mercer Street Friends, I would say go to their website, mercerstreetfriends.org, and just make the donation there. Our relationship with Mercer Street Friends, they come, they set it up, and we are there as a civic association to distribute it. And as the weather gets better, we're hoping to have a pop-up farm market where we can actually distribute fresh fruits and vegetables for free to anybody who wants to come by in the community.
I'm sitting here and I think about all the things that you do, right? And it amazes me that for somebody that is like you have so much in your head and you want to give back. And it just amazes me that you are so sweet.
Well, thank you.
To the community.
You know what it is, Veenie? When I had some health issues, man, and you have that, and I'm sure, well, you've had your bouts and stuff like with health challenges, and when you are alone, and you have that conversation with God, you start to put things in perspective, like what is really important, and I think you get down to the core of who you are as a person. And for me, I just love people, man. I just love people, and I've had some great experiences in life. I hope to have a lot more, but I want to do whatever I can to help people enjoy their lives and to realize that we as human beings, we got this thing called love, and it's really one love, and that we need to be sharing that.
So when I listen and I look, one of the things that I believe a lot of us have a problem with is unconditional love. But it starts with unconditionally loving ourselves. And we don't realize that. You started unconditionally loving yourself when you realized that you're 50. I was getting ready to call you old, but I know 50 is right next. It's like saying, Veenie, I will see you in 6 months. Exactly. So I won't call you old. I will call you
seasoned. I'll take seasoned.
I'll call you a veteran.
Okay.
I'll refuse to call you what you want me to call you.
Of course.
But you started getting yourself in shape and working out. But it wasn't just your physical shape. It was your mental shape as well. Talk to me about what it's like to be physically, mentally, and spiritually in love with yourself.
And that's a constant. It's constantly changing and evolving. But I know, I don't know when it started, but I just started accepting who I was, like the body that I'm in. This is what I got, and there's some things that I can do. I can eat a certain way. I can exercise in a certain way, but don't get smart. I can't grow any taller. You know what I mean? I can't make my hair all of a sudden start growing back. I know.
I'm gonna leave it alone. It's too easy.
But those things are what they are. And miraculously, when I started like accepting myself for who I am, I find that like I can do that with other people. And I do want to say this though, I spend a lot of time in the arts community, and I have a lot of friends who are artists, and I want my friends who are artists, especially the ones who consider themselves to be very liberal or very open, for them to start thinking about unconditionally loving not only themselves but other people, because I find that even in a community with a bunch of creatives, I'm starting to see a lot of walls coming up. Like, where creatives are critiquing other creatives and giving hard times to other people. If we're going to be all about inclusion and diversity, we all have to do it.
Just that simple.
Yeah, we all got to do it.
Inclusion. Even in the gospel community, it is like the worst in the gospel community about not inclusion. We fight each other. It's like crabs in a basket.
Yep.
And it's not good. We have about 3 minutes left. If somebody wanted to get in touch with you, all right, and not figure out how to make your hair grow or be like, what's the name? I wish I was a little bit taller. None of that.
Yeah, you crazy. No, folks, just making hip hop references.
Yes.
I love it. So I'm pretty accessible on social media. All right, 1 minute. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Trenton365, and that's the numbers. You can always send me an email, Trenton365show@gmail.com, and you can call me too, 609-433-0489.
He won't answer the phone.
Don't call me on Sunday. Absolutely, don't call me on Sunday. That's definitely family and rest day. But I'll get back to you. One of those things. I also want to say though, I got this beer podcast that I'm working on as well, and I'm always looking for sponsors and people want to get together and have a chat over food. Let's do that, man. Let's build this better community and let's make the world a better place. Right here in Trenton, you know what I'm saying?
Good night.